Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast. A podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have on the show Jonathan Dutton, or as he is affectionately known by those who know him as JD from JD Consultancy. Now, we have a bit of an interesting twist today. We're actually talking about a case study of a business that JD worked with, who initially thought they needed help with procurement, but eventually realised what they actually needed help with was exit. So it's an interesting story, I think, particularly interesting for our listeners out there who are business owners and perhaps trampling some of the tricky ground that goes with building and growing a business. And today we're really focusing on some of the issues that relate to revamping a business when you have exit in mind. So building a business from the perspective of making it something that has value at sale. So we look today at lots of different areas around cost cutting, consolidating businesses. We look at the concept of recurring revenue and revenue sources, types of revenue, and how they might impact value at sale. And we're looking at all of this from the context of some of the mistakes that business owners often make when they're growing their business. So without further ado, let's chat to JD. JD, welcome on to the podcast. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind.
Great. Okay. So today is a bit of an interesting change of gear to some of the ways and discussions that we usually have on this podcast. Today, we're really talking about a case study. And I think it's a really good case study because I think it's an example of what is happening in the real world of business right now, over and over and over and over again in SME land. So before we get into our case study, maybe just give us a little bit of your background, JD, so everyone knows who they're listening to and has a bit of context to set this up.
Well, I'm very old, so I've done lots of things, Joe. And after more than 30 years in business, I've squeezed a few things in. I started as a career in procurement, professional procurement, which is a great broad-based business education. But my bosses thought it was a great idea to put a buyer in charge of the sales team. So I became head of corporate sales of that company, moved to another company as head of corporate sales. And all salespeople want to work in marketing because they always think they don't do anything and go for long lunches and get paid more. So I joined the queue and ended up in marketing. I was marketing director for 2 public companies in London. And then quite by accident ended up as a COO of a peak body for marketing, the global peak body for marketing in London. And then was asked to start the peak body for procurement, my first career, here in Australia for this region. I did that for nearly 10 years and it became the 250th largest charity in Australia. And after I left 6 years ago, I started working for myself as an independent management consultant, facilitator, helper, doctor body, presenter, keynote speaker, MC, and what do you need doing? Everything I do has got something to do with procurement or the supply side of business, although I guess fundamentally I'm a sales and marketing support expert, really.
It's a really interesting combination you've got there. I mean, I guess on both sides of the procurement coin, which is interesting because we're talking about M&A today, which is another interesting area, I guess, to add to your toolkit there. But that's a really varied, very varied, background you're talking about here.
Well, it is, and fundamentally, I've spent 35 years really either as a buyer or a seller. That's the nature of business, isn't it? That's what business does. It buys and it sells. And I always thought if you could do both, you'd be able to offer anybody something.
Yeah.
I guess it's worked out like that. I think so anyway, and I've enjoyed it. And I accidentally got involved in M&A because it's normal business, Joe. A couple of big companies I worked for, major blue chip corporates. I was, the small guy on the team at the back helping out with a couple of major acquisitions. And then in the small business land, SME land, as you call it, quite rightly, of course, many SME owners and entrepreneurs want an exit path.
Yeah.
They feel their business is worth something, but they don't quite know how to value it, and they don't quite know how to position it for sale, and what to rest the value on. And I think even before you get to that stage, a lot of them are confused about what they want. It seems to me a lot of them are great SME subject matter experts rather than small, medium business experts. And what tires them, what burns them out is business management day to day, learning to be a good manager, manage cost and the pressure of making the sales, about making payroll this month. And the ones I've worked with, that's what wears them down. They're in love with their business, in love with their subject matter, and still are. What they're looking for is release from what they became, a professional manager. They never set out to be that. And for me, that was a common theme in the ones I've worked. And I've done about, 4 or 5 successful acquisitions in the last 3 or 4 years, and a couple ongoing. And that's a common theme, I feel.
So let's talk then about this particular case study today of the business who came to you for procurement advice initially. Was that right? That's where they started? This is such a fascinating story. I just love the train of where we're about to go here. So
let's give away the ending. Don't give away the ending.
I'm not giving it away.
There's a happy ending. Not the spoiler alert.
Stay to the end of the story.
Where this started was they had a really tough year in 2012. A lot of people did. We were running up to that election. Carbon tax had come out. The economy had lost confidence. Everybody was sat on their hands. People had slashed their secondary budgets. Businesses weren't spending, weren't investing. And most consultancy business really suffered 2012. And the one I was working closely with at the time did. And these people, rang me, and they were keen on doing far more work on the supply side. They saw it as a potentially a good market for their product, their services in consultancy, their subject. And I thought so too. And they wanted me to help give them access to our profession, procurement and supply. And being, CEO of the Peak Body for nearly 10 years, I'm fairly well connected in that world, the buyers. So that was the idea, and building the content to help the marketing into that new market. But what I found was, a fairly confused bit of thinking. Well, they were almost trying to grow out of desperation into a new market because they were saddled with this cost base. And what the truth of it was, they'd been set up for the last 2 or 3 years for growth. And they'd done well. 2009, 2010, 2011 wasn't too bad. And they were growing well. And they'd overinvested. Big office, lots of empty chairs, They put money in marketing. They had 3 companies for 3 products, which seemed a bit odd to me at the time. And, they were settled for growth. And that growth had basically collapsed with 2012. And they were feeling the pressure of the cost base. And they wanted, their answer was, as always, you get out your Ansoff matrix, don't you? New markets, new products. And they thought, well, there's nothing wrong with our products. Let's go for new markets. And JD, he knows everybody in procurement. He can help. And that's where the conversation started.
Right. Okay. So they think their need at the time is for someone to help them on the procurement side. So in you come, and what happened next?
Well, the first thing I obviously noticed was that they were saddled with the cost base, and they were trying to set sales targets to cover the cost base. And I think someone had to give them the confidence to address the elephant in the room, which was you run 3 companies. For 3 products, that you are in the process of letting 2 or 3 people go. Your sales are dropped. You've got a big, impressive office you paid for a fit out for. It's got to go. And that was a painful 3 months, and take some painful decisions when you've invested and spent your own good money building a nice new office, an impressive facility, hiring good staff, and then all of a sudden you've got to cut your cloth and leave the office, and took that as an opportunity to consolidate the 3 businesses into one. I mean, there's a real cost to running 3 companies when you could simply run one with 3 products.
So at this point, they didn't have in their mind yet that they wanted to exit. They were just cost cutting at this point.
They needed encouragement to grasp the nettle. They were still clinging to the idea that there'd be a saviour who could point them to a new market and sales would come. Sales will come.
Yeah.
There's an old adage, isn't it, on the bell curve. When you look at the bell curve of the business life cycle, you don't know you're on the down curve until you're halfway down it.
Yeah.
You still feel you're at the apex of the curve. You can get that growth going again.
Okay, great. And so what happened next?
Well, very quickly, the conversation about exit started. I think she rocked back in a chair, threw her hands up and said, "I only could get out of this mess." And I said, "Well, is that the aim?" And of course, she said, "Well, wouldn't it be wonderful? But I don't see we can sell a business. What's it worth and who'd buy it?"
Yeah.
And the conversation, I said, "Well, if that's the real objective, let's talk about that." And I think you've got something of value. The question is how you value it, how you substantiate that value, and how you find a buyer. With a difficult year immediately behind you, that's tough, isn't it, to sell? So we had to start from there.
Yeah. And these things that you're talking about, I think these are, number one, the energy and the enthusiasm of business owners as they're in growth is really alive and real. But then when market hits, stuff starts getting hard, sometimes it's just like burnout hits, right? And it's
absolutely.
But it's just right at that point that is the worst time to exit in many instances, right?
It is. And because what's happened in reality, Jo, is people who are subject matter experts and in love with their subject, their passion for their subject, are dragged off that. And they're forced to become professional managers. And they never signed up for that. They didn't want to be that. In a lot of cases, they're not trained for that. And they've got to learn a lot of new stuff. They've got to learn about accounts. They've got to learn about people management. They've got to learn about finance. They've got to learn about property, in this case as well, super, and how to put a sales and marketing strategy together and build value in a business. And it was almost immaterial what the business was about.
Yeah.
And both the two people running the business were great, respected subject matter experts. Nationally, internationally respected. The principal. She's very well known in her subject and much sought after overseas. But we had to cut out some of the nice work, which didn't pay much, for the work that really did. And of course, she became a professional manager, and that's what she didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And that conversation early on enabled us to take the hard decisions on cost fairly quickly, spend 6 months righting the ship, as it were, and getting the cost base fixed at a lower level. Consolidate and unify the three companies into one, exit the premises that were bought and take the pain of keeping the fit-out loan, and then finding new premises. And at the time, early 2013, there was a lot of property in Docklands, lots of advantages to moving there, certainly cost-wise and quality-wise, although we're at the end of the tram tracks in Windy City. And that worked out really well for them. They found a building that was very suitable for their brand, matched it very well, and that was a very successful move. They were able to acquire the small property as well, which built immediately, put an asset into the business.
And I guess just reflecting back on this journey, that they've been on, I guess what you were doing right here was helping them to work out what was going to drive value in their business at exit, given that they'd now identified this as something that they want to do. Is that right? You were
Absolutely.
working on the value drivers. And so if you reflect on those, what were the elements particularly that you thought would drive value for them, or indeed was impeding their value at that point when you'd come in?
First thing was to take that complexity out and put in a fixed cost base that looked very manageable and needed a simple target every month just to cover cost. And that reduced the staff base by half to do that as well, as well as the office, as well as the cost of running three companies, and some of the spurious costs that built up. So we got rid of all that. And that was the first thing. Secondly, we had to say, all right, what's going to sell this business's track record? 3 dots on a graph. That is, this year, next year, year after. Tangible growth, proven ability to bring cash in.
Yeah.
And what drove that in part was customer contracts. Now, this was a modest consulting business, very specialist, very good at what they did. But every gig was a new gig. Every sale had to be made every time. What we needed to do was bring recurring revenue in.
Yeah.
And so we invented a couple of new product streams or variants of what we were doing that brought recurring revenue guaranteed contracts in the future. And that helped shore up, a revenue base that guaranteed pretty much the coverage of the cost base. So if you can get your recurring revenue every month, guaranteed income coming down the line at you from the order book, then you've already got, a workable business model. And then if you can, put contracts on the table and say these are established customers that will continue to buy even when I'm not here, then, proving that is part of the sale process, I think. We did build in the property. Of course, they'd acquired a small office property, but it's a bit of a furphy that, because when the final exit came, that remained with the owners as an asset, as part of the deal, and effectively their super fund. But that was something else. Another factor in the marketing was brand association. So what I mean by that was we built in the partners, business development partners, channel partners, big brands, NGOs, networks, associations, people who respected the principal very much for her subject matter expertise, and were happy to be associated with a small firm to do that. And of course, that looks terribly impressive in a sale doc when you say, well, these big 6 brands are all partners and regular associates of ours, and we work with them often and frequently, and that added to the value in an intangible way, for sure. But it gave the buyer confidence that those contracts were there, and that capability was there. We also, of course, put in a new accounting system. So we moved off Excel into Xero. And we got a bookkeeper.
Wow.
Part-time and set all that professionally. We had an accounting firm as well that set the new chart of accounts and consolidated the 3 businesses into one. And that made everything very transparent, very simple to manage, cheaper to manage. And, a bookkeeper was only working, I think, 6 hours a week in the end. And that was for a payroll of up to a dozen people. He had it pretty well pinned down. It was a bit on autopilot, I suppose. When they were only making, 15, 20 sales a month, the paperwork was pretty easy to keep up with a package like Xero, or one of the equivalents would have been the same, I'm sure. So, we were getting this business on an even keel, if you like, and minimising the amount of direct management time that was needed in favour of the subject matter expertise, which was what was sought after, really. And that was the challenge. And I transitioned from sales and marketing coach to become effectively the business coach pretty quickly, just to keep the business discipline to what we'd agree and keep the plan. And for me, and I think for them, it became all about 3 dots on a graph. If we can show 3 dots on a graph ascending at a reasonable growth curve and build confidence into a buyer thinking, well, those contracts are going to keep coming in and those clients are going to stick with this firm, then that was part of it. We also set a target for staff retention. And I say we were lucky, but it was well managed. She managed well to keep the staff who were great consultants, very good people. But of course, younger had done very well, and after 3 or 4 years, they were thinking, should be moving on, really. And they'd certainly done a tour of duty. So keeping the staff was a key part of the sale process.
And so, how long were you readying the business for exit, would you say?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. And at the beginning of that process, at the beginning of the process, obviously, you didn't even know that you were about to go be readying a business for sale, because you thought you were there for something completely different.
I thought it was there for something completely different. And I was there to give them access to the supply side of business and help them sell their products to a new market. And it seemed very relevant. I agreed that topic is very relevant to the supply side of business, certainly is today, since the new legislation came in. And, that was prescient in many ways, but wasn't really necessary. There are good products and good markets existing. There were other factors in the way, I think.
Yeah. And so then you went down this path for 3.5 years. Did you at the beginning have in mind who the ideal buyer would be? Were you building this for sale to a particular person or organisation in mind?
I think the honest answer is we had an idea, but as we went through the journey, other opportunities arose. An overseas buyer joined the conversation after year 2. And we couldn't really have tangible, meaningful conversations until after year two, 2 dots on the graph. And the third dot on the graph, was really the proof of the concept, if you like, proof of offer. And by then, it was fairly obvious we'd end up where we were. So in the end, the business was acquired by one of the big four.
Right.
That was by no means certain. And I guess one of the challenges of that process is they have their way of acquiring businesses, and to a large degree, you have to fit in with their process. And it's a good process. It's well practiced. They've done it many times before, and it certainly eases the burden, the paperwork and the management burden on the seller. But you have to fit in, and part of that process is who gets a job at what level. And part of the business buyout process or the earn-out process, and then of course the KPIs that come with it, the targets that come with it, and how much in the middle, and how much at the end. And the further you go down that path, the more spurious the formula gets.
And was it heavily weighted to an earn-out, the entire sale component? Or
I'd coached them from day one that's where they were going to end up. So their mindset come round to that a little bit. And I guess after running your own business for whatever it was, 10, 12, 15 years, the last thing you want to do is become an employee with an earn-out.
Yeah.
And being hands-on and performance managed, if you like, by someone you've never met. Yeah. Especially when you're an acknowledged industry expert. But that was part of the maturity the buyer needed to pin down for herself, which she did, I think, very successfully. And as part of that process, what came to light was that her true aim was to take her subject matter expertise one step further, perhaps into politics. And that became her true ideal, I suppose. So she built for herself light at the end of the tunnel. Don't let me give the wrong impression. She's not begrudgingly working for the big four whilst she watches the clock. She's certainly not doing that. But she's certainly got a new vision of what she might achieve in her expert field, given an opportunity.
That is so, so important. And in many times on this podcast, we talk about the importance of sellers having a clear vision, understanding where they're going, why they're selling, and what life looks after sale, because, many owners are have spent many years completely integrated into this business. And then
Absolutely.
selling, is a little bit like taking one of their arms. They realise afterwards, they think they want the arm gone, but as it turns out, it can be
the analogy I've heard many times is my baby. My baby, the business is my baby. And of course, it was more personal for them in a way. Her husband works the business well, and he was keen to retire, and he had a large retirement agenda. He'd become his hobby was professional management of the super fund, I think, and he was keen to retire and not take. He was not a subject matter expert, so he was keen to do his own thing as well, and so it was a win-win-win. It really was. Everybody won out of this process, I think.
Yep, they won out because.
I should say, except me, I was out of a job.
But they won out because you had come in. They'd had the good luck or fortune or foresight to bring someone in who, and obviously they didn't bring you in for what you ended up providing them with, but you provided them with a way that they could get to an exit that provided what they wanted at the end of the day, when they didn't even, clearly at the beginning, they didn't even know what they wanted. I think this is
right. But I think what they really did was, right at the outset, they had the maturity and the common sense to realise the situation, to stop clinging to perhaps false hopes, and to listen to the questions I was asking. They didn't bring me in. What we did was we had a conversation, and I asked questions they couldn't answer, and they were big enough and mature enough to accept that, rather than fob you off and say, "I know the answers. It's my business. Nobody knows more about it than me."
Yeah.
Which is a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking.
And what were some of those questions? Like, what's an example of those questions?
An example was, why have we got 3 businesses? Why are we spending money on this? Do you realise that the percentage of income you're spending on that? Does that sound right to you? And really having the maturity to face the truth that they're overinvested. that they'd been caught out by an economic dip, and that's the truth of it. And that confronted them with economic realities that they had to wrestle down. And that's where, the idea or the conversation started about exit around the same time. And they started to realise themselves what they wanted was not the burden of professional day-to-day management. That's the irony. When your business grows to a certain point, you'll find this, Joe, when you're a very successful business, you stop being a lawyer, you start being a professional managing director.
That's right.
Whether you want to or not. And the test I think life gives us is you become only as good as you can teach. Because you can't do everything. As the principle, you can't do everything. Once your business reaches a certain number of people, a certain size, you can't do everything. So you have to teach other people to do what you could do, what you can do, and in many cases, what you can't do. And that's the challenge of it. And then you're faced with the challenge of hiring people better than you. And some people can't get over that, and their alternatives to hire clones. But no, that never works. You've got to hire people better than you at certain things, and then when you've got a strong team around you, your life's a lot easier. And you can teach what you can do. But a lot of people don't want that life. They're in love with their passion. They're passionate. They're not in love with running a business, and I think that was the case here. And recognising that was key. And then once we'd given ourselves or given them permission to have the conversation about what they really wanted, despite the millstone around the neck they saw at the minute, then that released us into putting a plan together. And I guess my role over 3 years was systematically reviewing each bit of the business for efficiency and for alignment, and then keeping that business discipline, 3 dots on the graph. And when an enterprise came up or a great idea, as it always does in an entrepreneur's business, and why don't we just go overseas and do all that? And I put it on, I'm serious, big conference in Europe, and we've been invited to Spain. We can turn it into a huge banjacks for weeks on end and take half the team. And I'm putting a price on that and saying, well, it's not just the cost, it's actually the distraction. And you're leaving Australia at peak business time here. There's 3 quarters in a year for marketing, not 4 in Australia. We've got this huge gap in the calendar. We've got a restructured financial year. And there's certain months which you effectively sell 60% in stock in 3 months of the year. And if you're not here for those 3 months closing sales, then the business will suffer. And it's about bringing business discipline and rigor into that calendar. And that's the role I was playing, really.
And so if you were then to reflect on this story, this beginning to end case study that you were a critical part of, what would you say is the learning in it for business owners who perhaps are at that point now of that high level of growth, or maybe coming towards the end of that high growth point and are starting to feel a bit fatigued? What are the questions that you would put to them? What are some of the learnings that you think are useful for them to be considering?
Well, it's easy to say and difficult to do, to have the confidence to ask the real questions and most importantly, be honest about the answers. Honest to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. What do you really want and why? And a lot of people say, I don't really know what I want. I say, well, it's tough working out what you want. But having the honesty to answer those confronting questions, and stop clinging to false hopes, clutching at straws. We will get sales. We will be able to make payroll next month, and it's not working like that. We've really got to take some tough decisions and get over the emotion of that. And if you like, be a little bit more dispassionate about how you're running the business, to do the right thing ultimately for everybody, or most people certainly. Always tough when you've got to let people go. But the truth is, the business wouldn't survive had you not. You'd have just driven yourself into the ground. So, the advice for me is to ask the honest questions, but answer them honestly, and listen to yourself, and listen to people who are asking difficult questions. Often when I ask a question to somebody, they can fob you off, and I see they're lying to themselves. Oh, I know all about that. I know how to do this. We'll sort it all out. How hard can it be? We'll fix it, And they haven't got the focus, they haven't got the honesty, and they haven't really got the background to be able to work out and keep the focus on what's important. And one of the difficulties for entrepreneurs, they get distracted so easily. And a line I use with them is, you've got idea overload, haven't you? And they go, how do you know that? I said, well, yes, they all do. They've got 57 ideas. They say, well, you don't know my business. How can you come in and have ideas that I've not had? I said, usually I can't. You've been in business 10 years. There's not an idea you've not had. The problem is you're pursuing them all. It won't take 5 minutes. I'll just get it going over there. You're starting rabbits running all over the place. And before you know, and this is a very common thing, there's 57 initiatives going on and nothing's actually getting done. And you really, it sounds simple, but you've really got to sit down and say, right, what's important and what we're trying to do, and let's stick to that. And then the idea overload, well, you can do that later.
Yeah. And so then, and obviously those questions in this particular instance led to actually exit. Sounds like a great idea. But my experience is actually that when people suddenly have the insight of the possibility of exit, it then becomes very hard for them to take the disciplined approach that you're talking about in this case study of sitting down and setting out the 3-year plan or 3.5-year plan and working through in a disciplined way and not pulling the ripcord straight away. Because many business owners are, they suddenly, particularly when they're at this worn out phase post-growth, will finally hear the words exit and really they've only got 12 months left in them. Then that's it there, but then it's too late to properly ready it for sale in the way that it appears that you did with this business. So what would you say to that, I guess? And how do we get in early enough?
First thing I'll say is that's absolutely true. I think that's absolutely, you've got to dig deep and you've got to really steel yourself to carry on. And you say, well, it's only 3 years, and you've run the business for 9, 10, 11, 12 or something. It's a quarter as long again, sure, but this time we've got it right. We're using all the knowledge we've got from the past to really consolidate into getting it right. And of course, when the numbers and the KPIs start coming right and you can see the path, you can see the trajectory, you're absolutely right. Impatience comes, it really does. And like you say, they want to pull the ripcord and can't we just find a buyer tomorrow? We've got 2 dots, isn't that enough? And 3 dots on the graph. And of course, I said, well, it's going to take us a year to find a buyer. And, what we want is competitive tension. So preferably we want 1, 2 or 3 interested parties. And maybe from different angles, because if they're all from the same sort of scenario, they might all draw the same conclusion. And I'm pleased to say that's what we ended up with. We ended up with 3 different interested parties. One dropped out quickly, the other 2 kept going, and one seemed to be dragging the feet. And then they, of course, quickly came up and made the acquisition. And the others, they seemed to be making haste early, and then they got stuck at an internal approval process that often happens. And of course, the trick in negotiation is not to show your eagerness, not show your And really, you've got to be mature. You've got to steel yourself, and these people did, and I think they got rewarded for it. They got some money. They got to keep the property as part of the super fund. The husband retired, and the principal got to work in the subject that she's so good at and almost exclusive. She's released from day-to-day business management, and the staff all got shiny new jobs. With a pay rise at a great firm, looks fabulous on the CVs. And again, they got released from a lot of the administrative burden that they were under because of course, the improved systems at a big 4 firm. I think they lost one who didn't want to go and do it. The rest all did, and most of them are still there and forging a great career.
Well, look, I just love this story. It's been such a useful case study, I think, that's demonstrated a lot of really useful things to many business owners, I think, who are listening to this, that will recognise just a little bit of themselves in elements of what we've talked about here.
Maybe you do, Joe. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to admit to any right here. It's far too public, JD, far too public.
Maybe at 1 o'clock you'll have this.
Fabulous. Look, thank you so much for your time today. And so tell us, if any of our listeners are looking to connect with you, how do they go about doing it? And what is it that you do these days, JD, that you can assist them with?
I do all sorts of things. I'm a helpful guy, I suppose. Look, my nature is sales and marketing. I've been in business for 35 years, 20 years in huge businesses. I was very, very lucky, very well trained. And I've had the brutal reality in the last 15 years of working in very small businesses where we've really been chasing organic growth rather than acquisitive growth, which is the hardest growth, sweat equity, if you like. So and that's what I do. And most of what I do is something relating to procurement, supply side management, or usually sales and marketing to the chief procurement officers of the top 500 companies in Australia. But my website tells you everything you want to know about me, jdconsultancy.com.au. You find me on LinkedIn easily enough, Jonathan Dutton, and I'm not difficult to find.
Well, JD, I just want to say a massive thank you to coming on to the podcast today. We have absolutely loved having you.
You're very kind, Joe. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Deal Room podcast. If you'd like more information about this topic, then just head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com, where you'll be able to contact JD. You'll be able to get details of how to contact JD. You just be able to click through to his company, JD Consultancy, or also click through to him on LinkedIn. There on our website, you'll also be able to find details of how to contact our lawyers at Aspect Legal if you or your clients would like to discuss any legal aspects of sales or acquisitions. Here at Aspect Legal, we are all about driving successful and fast, easy deals. And we do this by using a 5-step methodology. So if you are interested in getting some assistance, then it's really easy to get started. We have a free initial discussion. Just head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au, and there you can get yourself a free chat with one of our legal eagles to get you on your way. Well, that's it. I really hope you enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, I'd love it if you could possibly pop over to Apple Podcasts or your favourite podcast player and leave us a review. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe while you're there. That's it. Thanks again for listening in. You've been listening to the Deal Room podcast, and I'm Joanna Oakey. See you next time. Aspect Legal has a number of great services that help businesses prepare for a sale or acquisition, to help them prepare in advance and to get transaction ready. We've also got a range of services to help guide businesses through the sale and acquisitions process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. We provide a free consultation to discuss your proposed sale or acquisition. So see our show notes on how to book a time to speak with us, or head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.